Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Joseph Reid has had a passion for loving and helping people from a very early age. He is the founder and executive director of Broken People, an international mental health peer support group. He is also very active as a peer support specialist and family advocate with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, N-A-M-I. It's the nation's largest grassroots mental health nonprofit organization. Joseph is extremely passionate about following God's direction, loving and serving his wife, Melissa, of 24 years, and trying to keep up with his 4 awesome grown kids. He's currently the author of Broken Like Me and oversees several other brilliant writers on his website's blog that can be found at broken-people.org. Well, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor.
I'm delighted to get a chance to share your book and some of what you've learned with our audience. Broken Like Me, I believe, is the title, and you can give us the subtitle. Tell us a little bit about your book and how you came to write it.
Yeah, so the subtitle is An Insider's Toolkit for Mending Broken People. And I came to write it. The short story is that I lost a friend to suicide, and that's a big story. And he was somebody that struggled. He was somebody that felt broken like me, and we just really talked to each other. We understood each other, and he was a huge advocate for mental health, and I was just kind of trying to stumble along and find my way, and just trying to do things to survive every day. And when he passed away, I lost that connection with the world. And I got the phone call. I was in a little town in mid-Michigan, driving my FedEx truck, pulling out of a cheese factory. And I get the call that he had passed away. And then I hung up my phone, and I got what I think to be the clearest call from God, the voice of God I've ever heard, which is, to do this thing, to write this book. And then I connected with a bunch of people that are smarter than me. And they said, "Hey, you've got something here, and go ahead with it." That's the super condensed version, and a lot of things have happened as a result of that. But that's the nutshell.
When did you finish it and put it out there?
Yeah, so my friend died on January 24th, 2018. So I started writing that February. I was in the hospital for organized pneumonia for a few days, and I had it for 2 years, this rare form of pneumonia. Started typing in there, and I finished in May of 2021. So about 3.5 years of writing. And yeah, it was with June, the first week of June, it became an Amazon national bestseller, and in 3 or 4 categories. So I was pretty amazed that a self-published book would do something like that. But I just put it out there to help one person, and apparently there are a bunch of people that feel broken like me.
So there's so much in the book. We were talking a little bit before we got the interview started, and I was telling you that I've actually just used your assessment list, this mental health kind of check-in assessment list with a patient I had previous to this. Tell us about that. Tell us about this idea you have of being able to measure and label where you are on this ongoing platform.
Yeah, so it's a scale. And one of the times that I really saw that it was helpful and useful was when I was taking my son into the hospital and getting him assessed for hospitalization, psychiatric care. And they put the scale in front of him, 1 through 10, 1 being you're doing great, and 10 you're doing bad, which I refer to that as a positive 1 scale in my book. And usually there's like, because 1 is good and 10 is bad, around the number 3 mark, things start heading downhill. And then the very same table, the same minute, they put another scale in front of my son that's 10 is good and 1 is bad. And I just think about, when I first got on this call and you asked me how I was doing, that question freaks me out. But then when you asked me, Joe, how are you doing on the Joe scale or the U scale? It gave me so much relief because it's so simple to communicate. I can tell you how I am, and you, somebody I just met, has a pretty good idea how I'm doing. It's amazing. And not to brag about me, I'm sure there's something better out there. I just want to get the conversation started about having a scale that's communicated across the profession. And the way the scale works is it goes -10 to 10. And if you're feeling negative, spoiler alert, which side of the scale are you going to be on?
Well, the way it's lined up on your page, on the negative side, and that's at the bottom of the page. That's another thing I like. It goes from -10 up to 0 and then up to +10.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're feeling negative, you're on the negative side of the scale. And if you're feeling positive, you're on the positive side of the scale. So right off the bat, if somebody tells you I'm -1, I'm a negative whatever, then they're having a hard day. And that 0 point is kind of that blah moment where nobody really exists very long, but you don't really know how you're feeling. And you come and go over that kind of meridian through different phases. And a couple things were really important for me in making the scale, and that's to communicate, 1, when I need to go to the hospital, and 2, when I'm being manic. And one of the drawbacks to a 1 through 10 scale is there's not a whole lot of room for feeling good. And I feel like a scale should be fair for good feelings, like, hey, as many good feelings as bad. And when somebody's feeling manic, when I'm feeling manic, and it's not I'm not bipolar, but I have little short bouts of mania. Like it's a good feeling. Like I feel great, but then my response and my actions is really what gets me into trouble. So I've created this thing called a manic number within that -10 through 10 scale. And what that communicates is just like, hey, if I get to, and that number for me is a +6. If I get to a +6, I just ask myself the question, hey, am I manic? And if I am, what kind of coping skills can I put in place to help the inevitable fall from grace, or the fall from this wonderful feeling? But also just acknowledging, heck, I feel good. Like we should celebrate any kind of good feeling we have, as long as we're on the positive side of the scale. Hey, let's celebrate that. Let's acknowledge that, and let's enjoy it, rather than being afraid that, oh, I'm manic, I'm going to crash and burn, which is a constant fear of mine. And the crisis number is on the other side of the scale. It's a negative number. And this is the number my family, my friends, my pastor, my therapist, my doctor, they all know that if Joe hits this number or approaches this number, which is a -6, then we need to seek medical intervention, hospitalization. And there's this constant moving between these two extremes for me. And I had a friend in Ireland, and I don't know if I shared this story with you or not. He traveled to Ireland, and his wife is a therapist, and his friends that went with him here from West Michigan was a nurse and another guy. So 4 people in Ireland. They land in Ireland, and his knee starts hurting him. He's like, oh, this is weird. And then the next day, he starts getting a fever. And the next day, he's in complete psychosis. He's out of his mind. He is not making any sense. They went to the doctor the day before, and it's like, oh, it's an infection. We'll give him some whatever you give for infection. I'm not a doctor. And let me just emphasize that for the purposes of this show, I'm not a therapist. I just do peer support. Well, the doctor sent him home, back to the hotel. He's talking with his wife, and he's not making any sense. He's talking about all these crazy things. And he says one thing. He says, tell Joe I'm at a -7. And right away, they rush him to the hospital because they realize it's bad. He couldn't make sense out of anything except being able to say, this is where I am. And I feel like rather than saying all the thoughts that come to my head, like, which for me is constant suicidal thoughts, and it gets tiring to talk about it. I can just say one of those numbers and you, a complete stranger, will know how I'm doing. Yeah, and if you journal and you can keep track of your use scale, or what I call the mental health number, that number where you are presently, then you can do a lot of interesting studies. For example, if you, at the top of your journal or wherever, you put like, it's the weekend, how averaging out your weekends versus averaging out your weekdays, averaging out seasons, Mondays versus Fridays. You can do a lot of math with this thing that I haven't really attempted, but I definitely see the potential for it there. It would just bore the crap out of me, and that's not why I journal.
Well, and so before we move over to journaling and move away from the U scale, one of the things you have on the second page of the scale is, again, the listing from +10 to -10,
Mm-hmm.
and then a column for behaviors that would indicate that I'm in one of those behaviors, and then another column where I can list positive coping strategies I can use at each of those levels.
Yes.
And it is, to my mind, a wonderful tool for planning and empowering people. It's very much like what we've done for years with people before we had some of the more advanced tools for mind, body, energy work that we have today.
Mm-hmm.
We used to have people make a simple list of 3 to 5 things that they would start to do when they began to feel anxious.
Yeah.
And the core of it is, it's them initiating. So now they're focusing on things they have control over, and they immediately start to feel more in control.
Yeah.
And there's not just 1 or 2, there's a minimum of 3, and we're shooting for 5 to 7 things they can do. If the first 2 or 3 didn't work, here's my next step. It's right here on my list, and I've got it memorized. So that list of coping mechanisms that are paired with the scale of intensity of the negative state, I thought was just brilliant.
Yeah, and there's, it's so hard. Like when I'm in a tough state, like I refer to as a storm or my worst broken feeling, who's responsible for fixing me? Like who can do it? And the answer is only me. But what we can do is, when we're not in the middle of that storm, is this process or skill. I don't know if you've heard of it, coping ahead, which is just planning for those things so that when your friends know you're at a -3, maybe you're not capable in that situation to carry yourself across that meridian of 0 to in the positive. But your friends, if they know you're at a -3, what can they do to just be an encouragement or a safe place to land and feel comforted? And my friends still, they will literally drop off chocolate milk at my front door, or
yeah, and sometimes they can just remind you of, oh, look, you've done this before. These are your coping skills, and it can help break the cycle.
And that's the powerful thing about friendship and journaling, is this idea of reminding someone that I think gets so complicated in how we treat other people. And my friends, just to hear them remind me that I have value, remind me that I've helped them, and not with just like a general saying, but like with a story, and having a tight group of friends like I do, like they have those stories.
You leapfrogged over journaling and started talking about friends. So let's go there. Let's go talk about friends. You do some wonderful work in your book talking about the value of friendship, how to choose friends, intentional best friends. Can you give us a kind of a teaser for people to want to get the book and read more about that?
To start off, I think there's, for me, acknowledging that there's just something really complicated about having friendships and being an adult. Before my first hospitalization, as just the type of personality, an empath, an INFJ, like I just want to help people. And I was married in 1997, and my first hospitalization was 2002, which is interesting because I just found my journal from 2002 talking about that experience. And I was just helping everybody. I was doing children's ministry. I was working full time. I was doing an outreach ministry with my church. I was just helping everybody. And I got burnt out. And I said, I've got to find a way to feel okay not being everything for everybody. And pastors all the time talk about this principle of, have 12 disciples like Jesus or whatever, and I just I'm just like, man, 12's a lot. And I was just like, well, I have heard, and I really like the idea of this, if you're kind of the average of the 5 closest people you have to yourself.
Right.
And it's really important to me to have people from different walks of life in my life, because I think their perspective is different and very, very helpful. And if I'm only limited to being friends with, like, I'm 6'4", a 6'4" white guys, middle class, then I feel like I'm missing part of society. So I'm very intentional of thinking about, who am I letting in to my life as the closest people I connect with. And what this has done, which has been very, very helpful, is when I need somebody in my life, I have this thing called intentional best friends. I know who to ask. I have a literal list of people that I make every Thanksgiving, that I kind of redo the list, and I think about, who are the people in my life that I love the most, who are the people in my life that I need, and that need me, because if there's the word relationship, it's like the root of it is relate, and if you can't relate, then the ship don't float, so it's not going to work. So, and I don't know if your listeners have had friends where they feel like either one, they're giving constantly and the friend is not giving anything back, or they're receiving pain constantly and don't feel like they can share their pain with their friends. And it's got to be this balance. And then there's an ebb and flow to relationships where there's, you're going through something and it's going to be more of them comforting you, but there's got to be this balance. And so when I have a flat tire, if I'm limited by my budget, if I want to buy birthday gifts for anybody, it's going to be for this group of people. And I've told them, my intentional best friends, this small group of people, which right now it totals 4. I have 4 intentional best friends, this tight circle of friends. If they ever need anything, I want them to think of me first. I had a friend texted me 2 days ago, hey, would you help me with some housework? And if I have another friend, because I have hundreds and hundreds of friends, people I care about dearly, but I can't just do for all of them.
Right.
So if that one friend, my intentional best friend, asked me for something, and then if another friend comes to me and says, hey, I need your help with this, it's a no-brainer to me. I'm going to always go with that person I've made an intentional part of my life. And it's like every Thanksgiving, I talk about making this list. And for me, it's like a covenant. It's like this promise to this group of people, to these friends, that I make to them, to care for them, to support them in any way I can that's reasonable. And a promise to come to them with my problems. They're the friends I have fun with, the friends I learn from. And if I'm the average of these 4 guys, I'm an incredible human being. And my friend that passed away, I shared a little bit earlier, he during that time, I think I had 11 intentional best friends. And losing him was hard.
And what year was that? 2018 or
2018? Yeah, the January.
Well, and you talk about boundaries, which is very nice, really good topic.
Yes.
And you mentioned one of the books that I frequently recommend to people about boundaries, because it has that as the title.
Yeah,
Cloud and Townsend's book on that. There are some really, I would say, kind of earthy, very down-to-earth ways that you talk about this to make it understandable for people, that it's okay for me to have preferences and communicate those.
Yes.
And let them actually drive who I spend or I choose to spend a lot of time and energy with. It's not an insult to somebody else. It's just a preference based on who I am and who I want to be and how I like to be.
Yeah, it's so hard to make decisions as an adult. I feel like for me, and especially when I wrestle with, am I going to hurt so-and-so's feelings? Well, they get it. They understand the struggle. And I think everybody struggles with it. It's just, the problem is we don't talk about the struggle. So it continues to be a struggle. It continues to be this issue that's hidden beneath the skin. You know,
Well, and there's another important point that you make in the book, which is if people are out there trying to think they're going to go look for themselves or go find themselves, you make the point of just being yourself, right?
yeah,
Living into what feels good to you, giving
yeah,
yourself permission to just be yourself rather than try
yeah,
to be what you think somebody else wants you to be.
yep,
And this is a kind of one of those tenuous points where you just mentioned, if I'm going to be the average of the 5 people that I choose as, let's say, intentional friends, for some people that would kind of nudge them into, now that they've chosen these intentional friends, now they want to try and be who they think these 5 people want them to be, or they
right,
want to be more like those people.
right,
And the point you were making in the book is that really won't work. You need to just be yourself, get comfortable being yourself,
yeah,
and then choose friends who are in alignment or at least compatible with that.
yeah. And that journey to finding out who you are, I mean, that's really where the journal has been such a huge tool. And that's the second one I bring in, like just being, you know, extremely honest with your opinions about things to the point where you would really offend a lot of people. But if you can get those honest thoughts out there, like your fears and your prejudices and your biases and all these other things out there, you know, it's not a problem to have them as much as what you do with those things. And you know, I don't like opera, but and I didn't like Anne of Green Gables, but I used to watch it because all the girls would watch it, and I just wanted to impress them. But I told everybody I liked it, but I was suffering the whole time. And it's so important, because if you don't decide who you are, then the other people around you will decide it for yourself. And you don't want other people deciding for you. I mean, I don't even want the 18-year-old Joe Reid to decide what the 46-year-old Joe Reid is doing. So I keep reinventing and rethinking about who I am in this present space, and just trying to live honestly and faithfully. But the thing is, we want to impress people. I really want to impress you right now and everybody listening. But I also want to help. And I can't do both. And maybe I can, but I'm gonna err on the side of helping, as opposed to telling you maybe what I think you would want to hear, or your listeners.
Yeah, and that gets off the rails very quickly because that's a moving target.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas who you really are and what you feel comfortable with
Yeah,
um, is more stable. It's more here in the moment. And it's so much easier in another sense
yeah,
to just take the breath, check in with yourself,
yeah,
and then talk from what feels right rather than trying to think and do all the mental math about, well, what will this person like?
yeah. It's like trying to tell a lie. It just leads to more lies.
Yeah.
There's a great poem out there, and I don't know the word for word, and I forget the author, but he talks about trying to find happiness. Happiness is like a butterfly. And if you chase that butterfly, you're never going to get it. But if you just sit still and be, then happiness or that butterfly will land on your shoulder. And I think that's about our purpose and our success. I think, you know, you can't chase happiness and find it. You just got to find out who you are and then be it. And that requires a level of honesty that's like, you know, that I didn't like myself for a long time. And I went through this transformation, especially after my first hospitalization, to try to figure out, what do I really believe in, and why? Because, you know, belief in itself is a tough cookie to swallow, especially when you're brought up in a Judeo-Christian environment like I was. And there's so many other things out there. It's like, oh, am I just kind of going with the crowd that I grew up with, or you know, asking the question why, was huge for me.
Another tool, and you call it the hammer in your work, is a journal
Yes.
and journaling. And you've got some unique perspectives on that. And you start with going to the research and citing how there's substantial research that says journaling is good for you,
Yeah.
period, right? It's just good in all
Yeah.
these different areas.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you use journaling for yourself?
Yeah. So journaling is just like whatever you feel, whatever you think, whatever you need to do, just put it down on paper. It's just making the frustrating and the overwhelming things that are on the inside that are burdening me and exploding on the inside of me, and just putting them out there for me to see and analyze on the outside. And it's not even journaling that, there's journaling and writing on paper. There's a whole bunch of information that relates to like the benefit of even writing, the kinesthetic value of focusing and drawing letters on a page, and focusing on that to be able to get your mind away from some of those more darker thoughts. But just, thinking about what you're thinking about, that's what mindfulness is. And having a space to be able to openly and safely share that. That's what a journal is. And it could take on a lot of different forms, from a written journal to a video journal to an audio journal. It's been a place where I can ask the really tough questions about life and make really big decisions without the fear of anybody judging me or me disappointing anybody, because those have a tendency to muddy who I think I am, because I want to impress or not offend another person.
So let me challenge you a little bit and see how good your memory is. How much can you share with us of the story about journaling at the smaller end, on that day where you wanted to stay in bed and you just started listing,
Yes.
and the next thing you know, it led to the ketchup on the ice cream?
Delicious ketchup and ice cream. Yeah. So it was just a random day. I think it was in the summer or something. I don't know. I actually share in my book word for word the journal entry. So it's nothing edited out. The whole day is in there. And I start off this day, it's 10 in the morning, it's 9:30 in the morning, and I just can't move. And I have all of these things that I feel like I have to do. So then I just start to journal about like the struggle and all of that. And I don't remember what I wrote in the journal or how it got me moving in the right direction, but I just remember this concept of forward is forward, and just doing little things to move myself forward. So I go to the gym and I help my mother-in-law with something, and then I had to drive up to some place to get my boys from their grandfather, and there's this guy putting ketchup on ice cream, and I was like, this is the weirdest thing in the world, as I'm trying to write this passage about journaling, and it ended up being like potato salad or something, which isn't even better. But
Well, it's about the blessings that you talked about that came from that, right? So here's this whole idea of you didn't even want to get out of bed, but rather than just lay there and soak in it and implode, you started listing the thoughts in your head, which really opened up the flow and let you even get out of bed. And then, as you talked about and journaled about, it led to this magnificent, goofy interchange with this gentleman who had his own issues and was homeless, and you started giving him resources, and it ended up being a blessing for you and him, because you used journaling when you were feeling so negative in the morning.
yeah, when we're struggling with thoughts and we try to bury those thoughts, we're really just burying ourselves, and we're hurting ourselves. So a journal is just one really great place to get that out there, so then you can begin to heal. And one of the important things, one of the most helpful things for me to do is to go to the gym. And I knew if I could get to the gym, that I would feel better. But I had to get all those feelings out. Like one of the things I was struggling with was I wanted to watch pornography, and like that's something that's not something that I approve of for myself. And so I just put it out there honestly, because I knew I'd feel like crap afterwards. So yeah, and as some people questioned me putting that in my book, but like, hey, we got to talk about real things, and opening that gate for all those feelings, it kind of gets it out of here, so then I can begin to fill up myself and my head and my soul with the good things that I could do that day.
And it just led to a series of blessings. And I really enjoyed it as an example. It wasn't like, here's the project I'm going to do to solve all the world's problems. It's just, I'm stuck in bed. Let me get that stuff out of my head. And when I did, the day unfolded and all kinds of good stuff happened
Yeah.
that wouldn't have happened if I'd stayed in bed.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been the person that wants to save the world, but nobody can do that. All we can do is help one person. And that's my goal, just to help one more person. And if that's you, or if that's you, listener, yeah, none of us has the capacity to carry that kind of weight on our shoulders. But we can't really, there's this idea I love, and I've actually talked about this with police officers, is this greatest commandment that Jesus mentions: love your neighbor as yourself. And what I think Jesus does there is he sets the bar for a capacity to love other people by how well and how much we love ourselves. And if I don't take care of me, I can't take care of you. So how well am I taking care of myself? And sometimes we can look at ourselves and say, we can look at how we treat our friends, and we say, wow, I must not be taking very good care of myself, because I'm looking at how I'm being to my kids or my wife, or that bar doesn't go very far above how well you're caring for yourself. So just like I have trichotillomania. Trichotillomania is a hair pulling anxiety disorder. And a lot of times I won't know I'm anxious until I get an infection on the side of my face, and I'm just picking. And I was like, a red flag goes off in my head. Hey, you're doing this. So there's something happening inside of you. And how are you going to deal with that? And yeah, those things can help you. A lot of times you can't see what's going on the inside, but you can see what's happening on the outside to indicate what you're struggling with on the inside. Wow, I don't know if I just took us way off the rail tracks and
That's
where we're
absolutely
going,
fine.
but
I was just going to suggest that you just take a breath and think, if we're running low on time here, what's an aspect of either your personal journey or things that you've had people share with you that was most useful, or another aspect of the book that we haven't talked about yet that you want to get in here?
yeah, I just, the one thing that really struck me, there's two things in the book that really strike me as significant. And one of them is the story of this Mars orbiter, where NASA and Lockheed worked together to create this $6 million orbiter that's going to fly to Mars and test the weather and send all this information back to us. And Lockheed Martin is, when it's constructing and building the software for this orbiter, it uses the metric system to program everything. And NASA, they launched the ship, it goes out and it's getting ready to orbit Mars. But the way NASA is entering information into the computer to send directions to the orbiter is in the imperial system. So right off the bat, there's this massive miscommunication between NASA and the orbiter, which lead to the orbiter crashing into Mars and them losing $6 million. And what that teaches me, or what I feel like that shows me, is that if, as you as a therapist and me as a person that feels broken, if we can't speak the same languages, there's going to be a lot of crashing and burning. And maybe we can avoid that by communicating in a way that we both can understand, because it's not really happening, at least in my experience. And the other thing that I think is that I really love about my story, or it's a story in my book that I really appreciate, is this idea of ripples and chain reactions. I look at journaling as a keystone habit, and a keystone habit is just one habit that other really good habits can be built on, because it's very basic. And when I was camping with my son, we're just dorks, and we were throwing sticks into the water, and I was equating the idea of writing in my journal like throwing that stick. As soon as I get my thoughts out on paper, I have no control over what happens next. I have just tossed that stick. And then what happens so beautiful with that stick is, what happens when it lands in the water? It makes a splash, and then there's ripples, but not just one ripple, there's several ripples, which is like a chain reaction. And when we throw that stick, or we write in that journal, there's all these side effects that happen from making the good decision of self-disclosure, that I think it's just beautiful to know that good decisions can snowball for the benefit of us, when we know very well that bad decisions can snowball. But to have this chain reaction of good decisions, it's, my goodness, it's transformed everything for me. It's like, to be able to write a 300 page book, like it's all started from one good decision.
And you mentioned self-disclosure there as a phrase, and I was thinking as I listened to your book and as you were talking about it, I listened and my ear picked up self-honesty, being more and more
Mm,
deeply honest with yourself
yeah.
and being willing to just, I mean, that's one of the things about in the journaling. I can't screen, I can't censor myself when I'm journaling and get any benefit from it. I just need to let it all spill out there.
Yeah.
And there are several books in the past few years that I've read where people are really speaking beautifully about that, whether it's Untamed by Glennon Doyle or We Are the Luckiest by Laura McGowan. And these two books speak so powerfully about how difficult it was, how surprising they were at how difficult it was to get more and more honest,
Yeah.
and how essential it is to be, some would call it brutally, some would call it fundamentally, some would call it radically honest.
Yeah.
And you can't shy away from things like you just said. Some friends were saying, oh, should you put that in your book about you wanted to watch pornography? Well, if that's what was really happening and
Yeah.
you can't be honest about it, you don't necessarily need to write a book about it. But if you can't journal about it,
Yeah.
right, if you can't even be honest with yourself about it, you can't move past it. You can't heal.
Yeah. And so many people, like, I am so supported, and I have so many safety nets that I've created around myself that I can do things like that and be honest to the point of what may be embarrassing or even damaging for other people to share, just because I do have that support system. Yeah, it's just, and I think people need to hear that somebody else will struggle with things like trichotillomania, or because that's a bigger issue than what gets discussed out in the world. Every
or
time I talk,
or the suicidal thoughts that you mentioned,
oh
right?
yeah, every 10 minutes, like I have something. And actually, to be honest, I think I've gone 2 weeks without a suicidal thought, which is pretty freaking amazing. But I just got to
But
make sure I'm not being manic right now too. Like,
right,
oh,
but
this
that's
is
the kind of thing that people won't often be honest about. And as you point out in your book, it's so useful to and fundamentally helpful to have a core group of people or intentional best friends
Mhm.
where you can voice that when it comes up.
Yeah, yeah. Like I had a friend I called the other day, and I was like, things were going really well with his son, and I was becoming bitter. So I called them and I said, I am envying you right now, and I don't like you very much. And it, just to be able to say, just be able to have that. And he loved the conversation because I was telling him I didn't like him because he's being such a good dad. And I want to be that. And then we get into the discussion of what's the difference between envy and jealousy. And that's another whole nother podcast. But it's just we need to be honest. We need to be able to share our hearts, and then when we can do that, we're more apt and more likely to find our passion and our purpose. Because what happened for me was tragedy over here, and my passions collided, and that's where I found purpose. My friend dying and my passion for just helping people collided, and then I got a book, and I've got this organization called Broken People, and yeah, and I just want to help somebody.
So before we close out here, let us know a little bit about the organization Broken People, your website, where people can find your book, etc.
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. I also have a link on my website, which is www.broken-people.org. And yeah, I started when I started writing the book, a friend of mine who was kind of mentoring me through the process is like, if you write a book, you're only going to help the people that read it. You should start a ministry. And I'm like, oh, please don't say that. Like, there's enough ministries out there, and I don't think there's, we need better people to run the ministries we have. And plus, I didn't want to deal with only Christians or whatever. Like, I didn't want to limit myself to that. And that's another reason why I self-published and didn't go with like a Christian publisher, because like the stories don't change when you have different beliefs. Like the struggle is all the same. And it's just, I have this different aspect of how I view the world. And so he's like, you need to start this thing. So I called the thing. I was like, I'm going to call it Broken People, because when I'm at my lowest point, I feel broken. And I wanted to see who's out there. So that he feels broken like me. And we have members in 43 countries. Today, I was just helping somebody in Daytona Beach, Florida. She messaged and said, I don't know where to find food, and I'm struggling. And, it's things like that where I can just, as somebody that's used to making cold calls and being out there with people, I just called a church. I started calling churches in Daytona Beach. Hey, where can we find food? And there's a Methodist church right on the beach that has food available on Wednesday from 8:30 to 11 for anybody that's listening in Daytona Beach. Yeah, and just little things like that. We helped a rape victim in Berlin, Germany, find support. It's just, and I'm speaking at NAMI State Conference in Michigan next week where they do the same thing. It's just like, we're not in competition, you and I and NAMI and all these other things. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We're not in competition to help people. We're all just trying to do our best to help people get through this struggle we call mental illness. And that's what I'm just trying to do my little part. And again, if there's somebody listening right now that's struggling, maybe my story can help you. My email's in my book. My website again is there. And yeah, we're just like the host here, we're just trying to do our best to help you out.
So it's broken-people.org.
Yes.
And the book is Broken Like Me.
Yeah. An insider's toolkit for mending broken people.
Well, I greatly appreciate your taking the time out of your busy life to share this with us and for the work you're doing. And good luck next week with your presentation at NAMI.
Thanks. And if I could just say other thing in closing, about the stories we tell ourselves, Brene Brown is really great at kind of highlighting vulnerability.
Well, and I love the fact that at the end of your book, you list several books. You say, here's a topic, here's a book, here's another topic, here's a book. And you listed one of her books in there too. And so. Yeah,
and even now at the end of this interview, the story I'm telling myself in my head is that I've disappointed you. And it's, and me just getting that out there to tell you that, it just helps me feel better.
Well, that's, that the story I'm telling, as I remember Brene Brown telling that story, this is a phrase that she uses and has saved her marriage a number of times.
Yeah.
So maybe it can save our relationship. So anyway,
I love you.
She has the idea that she and her husband have talked about it and said, when I get triggered, I want to say what's going on for me, but I'm going to use this phrase. So the story I'm telling myself now is ...
Right.
And she said, so he comes home one day and he says, did you have something planned for dinner? And she goes into this slow burn that's not so slow.
Right.
And thinking, I can't believe that, I just because I'm the woman, I have to plan all the meals. And so she's fuming and stomping around in the kitchen. And finally she decides to tell him.
Yeah.
So she stops and she says, okay, the story I'm telling myself now is you think that just because I'm the woman, I have to do all the domestic work. And he says, well, thanks for letting me know that. The reason I ask is on the way home, I stopped and got the fixings for lasagna. And if you didn't have anything planned, I'll make lasagna tonight. If you had something else planned, I'll make it on another night.
Yeah. And those voices, they lie, so much.
It's a wonderful tool. And I'm glad that you bring that kind of thing up because it's right here about the honesty, right?
Yeah.
Can I be honest?
Yeah.
But the honesty that's really useful is when I can own that I'm the one creating this story and I'm the one creating these emotions. Yeah. And I want to share it with you. And that's not blaming you.
Right. Beautiful. I just want to go on and keep talking, but I don't want to drag your show on very much longer.
Well, it's been delightful. And I hope people take advantage of whether it's, the Broken People ministry that you have going and or the book, or reaching out to you personally through your website. I greatly appreciate your taking the time. And I look forward to the next book you write.
Yeah. And don't buy my book. Don't visit my website. Go even connect with Journey's Dream, the stuff that's happening on this podcast. It's helpful tools. I don't care where you get your help, but reach out if you're struggling.
Right. Get the help.
Yeah. Get the help. This podcast has amazing resources. So just whatever it takes, just find it.
Well, thank you so much again for being here, and good luck again next week with your presentation.
Fingers crossed.
No, we're not worried. We're anxiously, positively expecting.
No, I'm worried.
All right. Take good care. Thanks for being here.
Word.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast. offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.